There he is.
Hey, Brian.
How are you this fine day?
Doing well. Busy. Lots of homework.
Are you still in California, eh?
Yeah. I might be here for the next few weeks, actually.
Oh, that's fine. It's working fine for us. So,
Cool.
yeah, as long as it works fine for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So far, so good.
Oh,
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying the homework stuff.
is that easier to understand?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
It makes more sense. I did have a question about the homework that we just turned in.
Yeah, that always builds, that always grabs a lot of questions. So,
Yeah.
it's sort of a do it, talk about it, do it again, do it next time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious what you wanted to turn it in. Did you want us to read that whole chapter on Hinduism and then reflect on each sub-chapter?
First of all, did you get the texts?
Yes, I do have the book.
Okay. So, and the anthology with world scripture, you've identified, and you're seeing what I'm that it's broken into parts.
Yeah, I read through probably half of the Hinduism section and reflected on that.
Okay. So I only want a little bit on each section.
Right.
One or two verses on each major section.
Okay.
That sort of makes sense. For Hinduism, there's an introduction. There's creation story. Yeah.
Yeah, teachings, ethics.
Yeah. So it's just a way to get you in and have you doing something when you're doing the reading.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I made it like halfway through, like I said, and
Okay.
reflected on a few things.
That's fine.
So
so get started, and when do you think you'll be able to finish it up?
So I've submitted what I've done through half of it, so I could probably finish that chapter in the next day or two.
Okay, so do what you can. I think I set it up for 3 submissions, so it shouldn't be a problem to put in multiple ones.
Okay.
If it is, email me, okay, and just get it done by email. If the computer thinks you should be sending one document, I guess I'm worried that it would override the first document when you did the second document. I suppose that's what I'm worried about.
I see. Okay, I'll pay attention to that. And I did notice that I had the ability to do multiple submissions to an extent, and I just saw a time, a countdown.
Oh yeah. But anyway, if the computer doesn't do what you want it to do, send it to me by email, and I'll try and figure out what the settings were.
Okay.
There's so many literally thousands of things you have to worry about when you do online platforms like that you just miss stuff, and it frustrates the students. But there's just,
yeah.
So
well, I'll let you know that I have not been frustrated at all.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And did you enjoy the readings?
Yeah, it's been great.
I think it was probably 2 years ago that I read the Rig Veda, so I'm really enjoying just going through it again. It is so rich.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm just scraping the surface, but it is still so rich. Yeah.
So, and I said Rig Veda. I should have said Bhagavad Gita. I'm just realizing, there they are. Ian's up and running. Is the TV working?
I'm okay.
Yeah, Ian. Yeah, we got folks here. Hello. And Ian, we're gonna go quick and short. We're gonna get going right into the lecture pretty quickly once we get the questions sorted out. And then they're bailing at 7:15, and I think I can just go short side. So I think my goal for a schedule today is 10 minutes for questions and then a half-hour lecture, and I think we'll be okay. I realized I gave myself really an extra lecture for this material, and that looks like what I need. So It'll just be a short lecture tonight after we get done with our questions. Hello.
Hi.
Tell us about life. How are you guys doing?
Oh, we're just rushing around. Usual.
Super busy.
Good.
Yeah.
A lot of coaching.
Oh my. Enjoyable coaching or?
I love it. Yeah.
Good.
No, it's in line with my energy. So, and then I want to make sure that we're on the same page, Brian. I'm kind of hearing more for the lecture.
Yeah,
And if you
I
want me to
assume that.
participate in discussion,
Oh yeah, I do.
it's going to be more based off my experiences than the reading. I just don't have the bandwidth to do the reading outside of here
Okay.
with work and the other studies that I'm working on right now.
That's my assumption with the lecture folks. That's all they'll be doing.
Okay.
Is
Well,
they're
I
just
wanna
gonna
make sure we're on
come-
the same page.
They're going to come, they're going to participate, but when I ask questions, this is the first time we've put full students with the lecture, with the lecture audience.
Uh-huh.
So just enjoy the conversation, jump in when it's meaningful, and that'd be great.
Okay.
I understand that.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Lance trying to say hello
Hello,
to
Annette.
you. And thank you. I'm honored you're here, and I know you're super busy, and glad to have you as a lecturer on my grad
I
student.
love coming. I look forward to it.
So, help her with her assignments whenever is possible is just fine. If you guys do them together and, however it works for you guys. So, and that would be just great too. So that would be super. Any good stories before we get going on what happened this week in your life? And no,
I got to share another conversation with my friend Monica, who's a Hindu.
oh, tell us about it.
Well, so our conversational context is about relationships and relational history, and just like how much her culture influenced her marriage and how empowering it's been for her to move outside of, to leave that marriage and kind of go against the grain of her culture. But she's had this appreciation through her religion. That was kind of like a negative outcome, was like her marriage from the culture, but a positive outcome of her belief system was just an acceptance of all. Like there's, in terms of like making it to the top of the mountain and seeking samadhi, there's not one way, there's many paths. And so she didn't feel like she had any aversion to other religions or other people. She looked at all people as family. And then somewhere down the line, I reflected my understanding of Atman and Brahman, and she was flattered with how I explained it. She was like, you did a better job than I ever would. So it was a great affirmation of my studies and understanding, I guess.
If there's anything I want you to learn, it's just what you said. That those folks that are in the life of any of our religions, if they're just in it, then so often they haven't gone to an academic setting to study it. They just live it. They can tell you stories about all this, but that's really what I was sort of hoping that we would really discover, is that your study now will put you a little ahead of them, because of that. When you live it, why study it? It's just sort of that funkiness to being so embedded in a religious tradition. And so so super. I'm glad you learned that and articulated that, because all of a sudden you realize how interesting it is for us to study it and try and understand it.
You said exactly what you did.
Continue, please.
Yeah, she just said exactly what you did, as far as she's just grown up in it. She's just lived it. So for her to articulate and to really think that maybe there's any difference in other people's experience, it's like, yeah, this just is the way that life is. So
Yeah, isn't that fun? No, I'm thrilled you found that one. So
yeah,
there we go.
and I related in that sense, growing up in like kind of a non-denominational spiritual community. I didn't really have like a language or a formal language for it. It was just like I thought that's how life was, and having this deeper understanding of self and the things around us. And then, leaving the nest and moving into out of adolescence, I'm like, oh, not everybody thinks this way. And I need to continue supporting myself in, these studies and this means of living.
Wonderful. That's a great story. Colton.
Yeah, so I had a really interesting conversation with a family I have a lot of respect for, and they're fairly religious in the Christian faith. And I actually was telling them about class and about the whole truth and how there's many truths. And I believe that there's more than one way. And I could see that I was challenging her view,
Right.
because she's a very open-minded and accepting person. And I found out pretty quickly why she had a block. And she grew up Islamic.
Wow,
And
what a journey.
And she said, at one time she was shamed when she wasn't wearing enough clothing, for not wearing, full length dress or covering her face, or her showing any skin. At one time was frowned upon. And when she moved here, obviously she felt a lot of freedom where that wasn't expected. But you find out quickly, when you start talking about the whole, there's many truths, a lot of people have some kind of triggering event where maybe their religion was restrictive or in their mind oppressive towards what they feel is right or creative and how they want to live their life. But I thought it was a really good conversation, because she actually came up to me afterwards and said, hey, I really got into that conversation. Talking about the whole truth thing, because, she has her way of belief in Christianity, and I could tell that I was challenging her belief system, is that there's a lot of other belief systems that should be accepted as well. It's okay if you don't agree, with them. We're all here to find meaning and great purpose.
If I can help you on this pathway, because number one, I'm thrilled you're doing it. I think it's when religious people have a chance to talk about religion, as long as it's well done, it's really enjoyable. It's only when it's not well done that everybody sort of gets their shirts in a knot. If I could help you focus your language just a smidge, and I would encourage you that there are many paths to enlightenment as opposed to many paths to truth. Then a Christian or anyone else out of the religions of India can sort of say, well, I'm not looking for enlightenment, so let's talk. It's not a threat if you talk about enlightenment.
Okay.
Truth becomes a much more challenging conversation.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to a Christian and trying to help them sort of articulate what's Christianity is really looking for, I would argue that it is very true that there's only one pathway to the Father, which is exactly what Scripture says. They're using, it's a very unique pathway that Christians have to accomplish the Father. Well, great, because no other religion wants to talk about the Father like that. The Jews don't want to talk about it like that. The Muslims don't want to talk. So you're giving them their unique pathway that's actually in their sacred texts. So one of the things is to find the language that doesn't offend the other person, but makes it interesting. If that makes sense. So the word truth is a loaded word, and be real careful with that.
But she never got upset.
Good.
But it made her think critically, because she wasn't used to someone bringing up a religious conversation and there being other ways of belief or religion that were acceptable outside of hers. But I think the reason why it was a good conversation is because she's been in two different religions.
Yeah.
She didn't grow up as a Christian.
Yeah.
She adopted that religion as freedom of choice.
Wonderful.
And so I think that's what kept her open-minded, is because she's had the experience of being partaking in two different religions, living both of them.
Both of them very
Yeah.
missionary oriented.
And so, I mean, there's at least a dichotomy of like going from one to another, rather than just being born into.
Excellent.
And
Great conversation.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for starting the conversation.
Yeah.
Because that's what I hope one of the goals that we have is for you to become more and more comfortable in having these conversations, because you're coming from a student perspective. So you're open, you're willing to learn, but you know something, and you'd love to share it if you can find a person that will listen. So good for you. That's wonderful. And Miss Kate, how are you doing? Any week conversations this week or anything that happened?
I got a little behind my homework, to be honest. Didn't have enough time
Okay.
to spend on it as I would have liked.
Did you have a chance to start it?
I did submit the scriptural comparison right before we were trying
good.
to leave. I was trying to print it, and our printer is just wacky, so
Okay.
I just submitted it online.
Great.
But,
That's super.
yeah, I mean that was interesting in itself. That assignment,
Okay.
just having all of that contact with that foreign material there's a lot of interesting stories in the scriptures, and just like the way that they tell the story, it's more like threads of thoughts kind of just sewn together.
Did you use science all the way through as your bounce point?
I used I didn't.
Okay.
I used kind of American culture and Christianity, I guess.
Okay,
That's
excellent.
kind of-
It's your choice. Just
Yeah.
whatever your background is.
Like those are the things I was drawing from, even
Excellent.
though I never really delved into Christianity that much. I still know enough to have that
No.
be a frame of reference.
Oh, that's often, and did it now make sense, the various major topics you're dealing with?
Mhm.
You're reading some material, 2 or 3 pages in each major topic. You're seeing something that, oh, there's a bounce point. I can come off of that one. And you're able to write. Did that make sense in that level? Okay.
Yeah, yep.
And again, this first one, it's just more an exposure. And I just try and understand how you read the assignment and then try and figure out how to explain it better to the next group. That's just typical on these first assignments. They're hard to do because you've never done anything like it. And so thank you for getting something in.
Yeah.
Any final comments, Ian? I'm going to launch in here.
I'm just gonna give you.
No, go for it.
The assignment, me over here in the corner.
Okay.
I saw a guy on public broadcast today, this week, a musician by the name of Joshua Powell. Have you ever heard of him? Ian, have you heard of him? He was brand new.
I have not.
He's got hair about down to his belly button. He's a bit of a rocker, punker type crazy guy, but he's moving into kind of Hindu type music. His parents are Christian ministers, and he's got a full-on band. But I found it really, really interesting just how he's using sound and words and visual kind of cues, and it felt like it would. I'm going to go delve into a little bit more of what he's up to, because it just felt like it would be something that would be kind of helpful, just as far as healing and just kind of branching off and tying two or three faiths together. I think it would be almost 3.
So John Powell, that was
Joshua Powell.
Powell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So pretty
Thank you.
cool. Check him out and tell me what you think.
Anybody get through the Bhagavad Gita reading?
Yeah.
Wasn't that interesting, folks? Especially for our yoga person. So yogi, and you sort of really understand that very basic understanding of meditation. It's really an interesting section. We don't have much time. Anybody just got to say something about the Gita this week?
I mean, I have highlighted stuff, but
Okay.
it's
Ian, did you get any time to read the Gita?
I did. I read up to chapter 10, through chapter 10.
Good.
And yeah, I found it, albeit like repetitive in some senses, in Krishna. It just sounded like coming from an egotistical place, like I am this, I am that, I am everything, but I know what he's saying. It was really wonderful reading. Yeah, I enjoyed the story and the reaffirmation of the practices of being a human, being of service and not doing out of greed, you know, the looking for the term. But yeah, just living in a sense of service and having a single focal point, you know, that of Krishna to, you know, live your life with this intent focus until your dying day. And in that dying moment, you know, you're still focusing on Krishna and you shall be reunited with him.
Always important. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to launch 25 minutes. I think I can do what I need to do in 25. And it's recording. You didn't have to say that to me. I did it. Okay, Ian, just checking.
I noticed.
Good for you. Who remembers or who in their notes discovered our first pathway of transformation from last week?
Say that again?
What was the first pathway of transformation? Because there's 3 pathways. We're going to talk about the second one now, but what was the first one? Knowledge, yeah. So knowledge becomes the first pathway. And any religion will use these 3 pathways. You can identify them in all religions as the various ways that people transform their lives. Did you need something to bounce off of?
No. Okay.
I don't know if, yeah, those are the final notes. I was one of the pathway books is missing some pages, and those were the final pages. If you notice that your pages run out here,
Okay,
that was the final pages. I didn't get it off the printer properly.
got it.
I just got the notes for next week. Yeah, I didn't bring notes for last week's lecture. If you, okay, so.
Okay.
So the second pathway is a path of action, doing things to accomplish your faith. One of the examples within Christianity are the long pilgrimages. So the pilgrimage by early Christians to Jerusalem is a pathway of action. You're doing something to make your faith stronger. In Hinduism, we're going to discover those that go into the forests. Is going to become their pathway of action, and so that becomes a second way. For most, they're a long way off from spiritual perfection. You can talk to 1,000 people, and 1,000 people would say, "Man, I don't know how I'd ever get to enlightenment. It just seems forever or incredibly difficult to get to spiritual perfection." If you're talking about, I've got to read these books, I've got to say my mantra 1,000 times, it just seems so hard for them. So they need other tools. Most working people simply like to go to their house of worship. They like to be around other people that are at sort of the same level, and that's good enough for life. They're not trying to be a spiritual elite. That is quite challenging for most people to accomplish. And in Christianity, we call those priests or pastors. They could be a saint. These kinds of folks are very rare, and it's hard to get to. So the common folks, they need a different path. So they've got to have a path of action is really, really good. They need help along the way. And they really want to work towards lessening of desire, which means getting the consumerism out of their lives, reducing that consumerism, because it's quite challenging. They know that that's where the bad karma is going to come from, is their constant attraction to things that are around them. So they want to figure out ways of reducing that desire all the time. And so they have an antithesis type of a feeling within Hinduism than we do within the American consumer society. We're being pushed to be more and more consumers. They're being pushed through Hinduism to reduce that sense of desire. If they have too much desire, that creates hot karma, and that's bad karma. They want cool karma, action done without desire. That's good karma. Does that make sense? The desire issues, the challenge of desires, the bad things that happen, greed, lies, struggles, fear. There's so many bad things that happens when you're attempting to get something, whether it's your own or your neighbor's or how it is. That kind of desire tends to lead to hot karma, which is bad karma. Cool.
How do they set like goals and things like that? I mean, if desire is seen as like a bad thing, I mean, how do they motivate to get things done? Because like it's so opposite of Western culture. It's like almost hard to comprehend. And like, how do you get anything done if you don't desire to accomplish things? You know, and it's
So the question becomes, what's the goal?
Yeah.
If the goal is that which is deep within, you already have it. You don't need anything else. You just need to figure out the way to get to that which is pure within you. And so that becomes a question of ignorance. You don't know what good goals are. If you live the American society, then your goals are taking you to a place that is actually hurting you, but you don't know it. And again, that
from
is
the Hindu.
that's
perspective.
Hindu, that's Greek. All of your ancient philosophers knew this, that your desires take you to the wrong place. And that's one of the most fascinating parts of any studying philosophy, is you begin to realize that our American cultural society takes us all to the wrong place,
which is
greed, desire, envy, all of those virtues, all of those things that actually make our lives worse. And that becomes the real challenge, to sort of say, wow, what do they know that we don't? And so now it makes sense for a yogi to be sitting in the corner doing nothing, because he's minimizing all of the potential desires. If he stood up and walked around, he'd see a new car. He'd see a woman or a man. He would see new clothes. He would see all those things that society wants to do to activate its economic engines, but it's all external. And therefore, it's meaningless, because it'll all go away. Just go to the dump if you want to get a sense of that. I mean, just, wow, we had pre-dump day last weekend, and you just look at it, and we were taking these wonderful new, washing machines and drying machines were brand new and spiffy and all the latest Duhismans, and I was just chucking them off the back of the trailer and getting the most simple, rebuying the simplest washer and dryer I could find in the market. I was so tired of the new and better. It didn't work. And the minute it went wrong, it was expensive to fix, and it was stupid. And so you just get a sense of, wow, what are we chasing, and what are we buying, and what are we spending? And so the yogi, when you see it, you realize they've figured out a way to reduce the desire. Okay? The other problem you're having is that you're only going to get one shot to do it. So your life is constructed for you to maximize what you're getting in your life. How many lives do they have to accomplish something?
I forget how many. I mean,
There is no number.
there is no number, right?
It's more than one. Let's put it that way. You got one, you better get going, because you're not going to be president unless you run the ladders. Okay? Or you're not going to be CEO of your corporation unless you run the ladders, because you've only got one life. They got millions. Patience is wonderfully wedded into that ability to get everything you want, but you got millions of shots at it. Okay, so it's just a different way of structuring life. And they aren't on this incredible pathway. Though much of American society has arrived in India, especially through the technology. And so they're doing the same thing you're doing now, and in lots of the major centers of India. But the minute you go back into the villages, you go back into these settings of long term. So karma is really important, and karma and how it functions is really an important concept. So keep working on this. We're going to come back to it over and over and over again. And we're going to see differences within Hinduism. Buddhism is going to adjust it, and then Jainism is going to deal with it on steroids. So we got lots of time to think about karma as we go through. So just we'll keep at this topic because it's a reversal to our head.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard. But it's really good for us. If we could somehow disconnect from the consumerism, you would have a better life.
I'm just so
All philosophers
Yeah.
will want to teach you that
And just,
if you can disconnect from desire.
and just like one really quick insight. There's a lady that I've listened to. Her name's Abraham Hicks. I don't know if you ever heard of that. She talks about the nothingness is where the real work is done. She says it's actually being still and looking within. And I look at some of the people around me a lot of times, and they can't sit still. They're always having to do something. They're always buying the next thing, and it's like, okay, what does this person do address? Because they can't even stand being still and with themselves to deal with, like it's almost like they don't want to spend time with themselves, just being. Kind of you're saying, and I think it's just like that's Western society, is that we're not allowed to be still because it's not productive. Quotations, but
Right.
it is productive.
That's right.
It's like the most productive thing you could do is to reflect, as we were talking about last time, have the knowledge, like increase your knowledge, do the action, and then reflect on your experiences, right? And just being.
We embed that within our spiritual life, and we don't value the spiritual life. Other than simply going to our spiritual center, being with other people, and you're trying to be productive.
Yeah.
When you're with those other people, you're trying to set up for your next sales meeting by talking to X, Y, and Z.
Right.
So you're trying to be productive in your spiritual setting. And so much of American life is that constant productivity. And you're always trying to do that. But the joy of McCall is go out in the woods. Today I went fishing with my grandson. Heaven!
Yeah.
I found heaven just sitting there. I think it's been 20 years since I fished. I mean, it is just not, but it's just such a wonderful, wonderful moment. So that's what we have to find, is that spiritual enlightening moment that we value even if other people don't, because we know what its value is. They don't yet. Maybe they will, but they don't know now. And that's a defect within American culture that we need to work on. We've just got to work on it. And so for these folks, they want a path of action. They want to be able to do something in their lifetime, knowing they've got many lifetimes to work with. So there's no panic that has to happen. And the key is you do what's expected in your place. Because if you try and break out of your place, if you try and run the corporate ladder like an American would do, you are breaking through your caste system. Your caste defines where you can be successful. Your dad did the same thing. Your grandfather did the same thing. Your great-grandfather did the same thing. You will be most successful and happiest doing what everyone else has done in your lineage. That will give you the best result because you won't be desiring to run the corporate ladder because you don't have the skills. Your dad didn't give you the skills. Your granddad didn't give you the skills. You don't have the skills to run up to the next level. And so you have to be content with where you're at. And so that contentment is very important. There's a wonderful story about the path of action that I enjoyed. It was actually, I'm just reading from a news wire. And so just to give you a sense of how the community tries to figure out its spiritual problems, and then what are its spiritual solutions on this pathway of action. And it's dealing with Nepal's crown prince, Dipendra. Nepal, and this is in 2001 is when this was reported. Nepal's crown prince, Dipendra, massacred almost his entire family, including his parents, the king, and queen, in a drunken rage, an official investigating panel said on Thursday. In a report released on Thursday night, it said it was certain Dipendra carried out the June 1st shootings. And then he fatally shot himself afterwards. A drunken crown prince indiscriminately fired, killing the royals, unquote, Terethra Rahabat, the Speaker of the lower house, and one of the two-man commission, told a news conference broadcast live on Nepali state TV and radio. He gunned down his father, King Birenda, and 8 other members of the royal family. Until now, the official explanation for the killings had been an accident, but few in the Himalayan mountain kingdom's 22 million people had not already heard through the grapevine that Dipendra was guilty of the crime. Riots followed new King Gairendra's coronation as confused and angry Nepalese grieved for leading members of the royal family. But officials said things had since calmed down. Quote, the situation is not serious, unquote, one said. The concerned ministry will look after security measures if necessary, unquote. The Nepali language newspaper Radhani, citing unnamed commission sources, said the panel had questioned over 150 people, including survivors and ballistics experts, and over 99% had pointedly said Dipendra was responsible. As an anxious population waited for news of the report, traditionalists bade an ancient Hindu farewell to Dipendra that they hope will banish the ill fortune that has struck the palace. Dipendra, as crown prince, was named king as he lay dying in a coma from an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound. As a monarch who died tragically, traditional Hindus believed he too had to have a Kato ceremony performed on his behalf, as did his murdered father on Monday. On Thursday, a Brahmin priest deliberately defiled himself to assume Dipendra's woes. The priest, a vegetarian all of his life, ate a meal laced with animal marrow before dressing as Dipendra and crossing the Bagmati River on elephant back. At first, the elephant appeared reluctant to go. As Nepali dignitaries slapped its buttocks to send the bad luck on its way, the elephant turned tail and chased them up a narrow pathway. Once brought under control by the Malhouts, it lumbered across the river, this time to a fusillade of stones and rotting fruit thrown by the now vengeful onlookers. The priest will be banished for the rest of his life, supported in exile by gifts and money donated by well-wishers, anxious to rid the capital of the bad luck that had plunged the nation into crisis. That's faith in action, folks. Does that make sense? They are actively trying to do something that would make their faith meaningful. And so and so for many of us, we have action as part of our faith journey. And for so many, so what would be the most active, Ian, that you would do in your faith that you do routinely, or it's something that you purposely do often or once in a while with special meaning? What's your path of action?
School.
Okay. You do it constantly, routinely, and it becomes your activity that is meaningful to you. A path of action.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I have a sense of service in everything that I do, whether it's self-care or directly for somebody else. But school for the past year and my ongoing education is, for the betterment of self and others around me. So that's my answer. I don't know. It's just not like I don't see like a single constant throughout my whole life. I think the actions look a little bit different in different parts of my life.
Kate, how would you identify your path of action to help you understand this pathway?
Well, I give offerings of flowers, and I pray,
Excellent.
I mean,
Yeah,
those are more
excellent.
devotional qualities than anything, but
Yeah.
I really is more of a bhakti yogi than
Okay.
anything else.
So your pathway is more a devotional pathway than an action pathway. And if you remember when you were kids, did your parents took you to a spiritual center of some sort? Did you all have that experience of your parents doing that? You know,
Yeah.
putting you in the car
A
and
handful of times.
yeah, putting you in the car and taking you somewhere. It might have been midnight mass if you came out of the Catholic tradition. It might have been Sunday school. It might have been going to a temple. But your parents often did something. That's less and less, and so fewer and fewer do that as parents to their children. But for many of us, when we were younger, that was their path of action. Every Sunday, they did something that got their family doing something. And so that action, see, has a spiritual component. You need to prove to yourself that you're spiritual. And how do you plan to do that? Well, the easiest way is go somewhere that's spiritual. So the path of action helps the middle class kind of families that are, on that middle rung of the caste system, or really in middle America, of proving their own spirituality. So it's just a doing that tells you you're a spiritual person. And that's a valuable part for many people. Okay. Any last thought on spiritual action, a path of action?
So for us, we will go to the woods just to have a moment of nature and it's nice. And I guess that's one action that we do in that way.
Absolutely.
Similar.
No, that's the beauty of our forests, is you get that privilege of acting your spiritual inclination. And often.
I don't know if Kate gives herself enough credit, but the one, like, just the way that I think that she organizes her environment is based off spiritual presence. Inviting in sacred things by the way that she decorates. We also use cards as a way of acting spiritual, pulling from a deck, whether it's like tarot cards or other spirit cards, and using that, maybe doing a spread or setting an intention for connecting to spirit or whatever. And it's like hard to say like what action I do that's organized and consistent. I'd say it's just like every year I look forward to connecting to the earth somehow through hunting, and getting better at being more connected that way. But yeah, it's like definitely very, like, I'm trying to explore, and I feel like coming to this class is action.
Exactly.
For me, like, that's the most action I've ever put into it, is consistently showing up to a class every week to see what's out there, to deepen my understanding, to create more meaning.
Excellent. Okay, then the last pathway that we have, let's is the path of devotion. And this is where Kate was going down. And if you go into any Hindu home, what you'll discover is a shrine somewhere. Any Buddhist home, and any of the religions of India will often have a shrine. Any of the Chinese homes, they'll have a shrine that they will devote to. And so devotion is somewhere where you can create focus in your world to help you be a spiritual person. And so if you were looking at this picture of a Hindu shrine, what do you see? What is meaningful to this household? Can you see anything there, Ian?
I see a couple candles. I can't make out the pictures.
Okay, let's start with that. Candles. Okay, so we have two candles, at least. Maybe the one in the front might be a third candle. So I think we can assume that there's three candles there, neatly arranged in a triangle. What's the point of candles? Every religion you ever encounter uses candles, it seems like. Why?
Is it to invite spirit?
Okay. Invitation of spirit.
I always known that, but I don't know why.
Okay.
I just know that it's supposed to invite spirit, whether good or bad.
What does candles produce?
Light.
Heat and light. And it's the
Yeah.
light that
Yeah.
they're seeking. And light is always attached to the word you like to use with your friend. With your friend in your conversation, you are
Truth.
achieving truth.
Yeah.
Light is always equal to truth. And so there's a spiritual pathway that candles always take us on. They give us heat, and for many of our homes, they don't have enough heat. So there is heat, but primarily it's light. And that's the knowledge that you're going to get. But it's also often lit to remember something. Many candles are lit to remember ancestors, those that have gone before. Again, in this setting, it doesn't seem like the candles may have that purpose, but it's more giving light to make sure that you can see what else is there. What else do you see?
Flower petals.
Flower petals. Many religions will use flowers. Why? Beauty. It brings beauty into the setting. What else does flower petals do?
They have a scent.
The scent of the flower petal, giving you your environment a new aroma. They give you a sense of really changeableness. They're at the really almost at the stage of dying when you take the petals off of them. So there's a sense of realization of where they are in their stage of life. But this one really, yes, Ian.
Would you say that also there's an aspect, like it's how we bring feminism into the picture?
Sure. Yeah. You can go in the direction most meaningful to you in this kind of a conversation. Okay, and the focus is on what? You've got your shrine. What are you focused on? If you went into a Chinese house, you'd probably see their grandfather, grandmother, great-grandfather, great-grandmother. So when we get to Chinese
the
religions,
lineage.
we're going to see that their focus is going to be on the ancestors. Who's the focus on here? And you don't know all the names, but you could get pretty close. What do you think they're focusing on?
The sages.
There, probably not a sage. We're dealing with one of the devotional gods here. We can't quite identify which one it might be, but it's one of the devotional gods this family focuses on for their spiritual attention. And so we'll get in. We did a bit of that, but and so if I were just to make a bet from some of my pictures. Wondering if that isn't Shiva. It doesn't look like Ganesha, the elephant. So my sense might be that Shiva. It doesn't look like Brahman. So my best guess from the ones I've seen would be Shiva. But again, the point is, the family is focusing on their personal God. And they're wanting to remember that. And remember how we went through Ganesha, and they would look at that picture, and there would be moral meaning embedded with all of that. And they might just say, I'm looking at all, and look at one point of it, and they could build a pathway of devotion. And so they would ask the gods, how can I save us? There isn't anyone out there that isn't sort of swamped by life. And their God needs to help them get through life. They just can't do their duty well. They realize they're screwing up. They realize, something happened yesterday. They saw a new car that they might want. They saw someone that was interesting to them. They saw a meal that wasn't vegetarian. They saw something in their life, and therefore they're always worried about their own duty. So the three great gods are very personal and present. And as they draw and focus on the gods, they will be encouraged with the virtues to be a better person. And we saw that with all the Ganesha virtues, that the picture is designed to carry them to a specific virtue, whether it's not to talk as much, whether it's to listen more, whether it's to focus on the tasks and duties of the day. So the picture will have been explained to them, and they will draw a moral message from that. And that will give them that sense of worship and or love. And they know that this is going to help them to liberation because they're just doing their shrine well today. So they're going to get good karma out of this. Good karma is going to flow because they're going to see something they can work on improving their life, and they're going to live a better day trying to work through that. So it gives them those moments where their devotion leads to better moral behavior, which leads to a better spiritual person, which leads them closer to enlightenment. So that pathway is daily and ongoing. And so their prayer would be what I've already heard today from some of you, to unify with the great God who is also in the inner soul of one's heart. One rises above the bondage of karma and finds joy and peace in the power of the beloved one, whoever the picture is that they are focused on in this setting. Does that? I'm going to let you guys go. Does that make sense, everybody?
Mhm.
Okay. Let's just talk. I think that I'm going to roll through to next week. No, that was, we did that. Let's see if I can get all right. Let's see if it's there. I think that's it. Okay, so for next week, again, anything you haven't done, finish up. Kate, send by email if the online doesn't do what you need it to do. If you needed to break an assignment up to get it done, break it up, finish it up, send it in parts. But if the computer doesn't accept multiple submissions, send it by email so that I get all of your work. So you want to finish up the Gita this week. And I'd like for you to give me a summary next week of your project. What would you like to do? And I think I'd like for you to do one for each religion. I've been sort of going. It depends on. It depends on. Well, no, I've always just done one project per course. Maybe I can't ask any more of you. So first of all, identify which religion you want to do your project in: Hinduism, Buddhism, or Jainism. And then begin to give me a sense of, because if you pick Hinduism, we better get going and get some material into. If you're waiting for Buddhism, then we'll sort of back off a little bit. But if you have a sense of what you'd like to do for a project, then I'd like your sense of that next week. Just give me a half a page, one paragraph of what you think you'd like to do in the course, which religion you'd like to do it on, and what in that religion you'd like to accomplish. Okay? So that's what I'd like for next week. Okay? That's really it for today. And I was pleased that we didn't have much time, but we were in a good place where we could do a short. Any questions that'll make your life better? Okay,
I want to
doable?
learn more about the whole desire thing.
Oh, I noticed.
I have a positive connotation with
Yeah.
that word,
Yeah.
and it seems like there's a negative connotation attached to it, and I want to know why.
Yeah.
We can talk more in between.
Like,
Here's-
I'm hung up on that.
Here is the most, the word that frustrated the philosophers the most, because they realized it was bad for you, is the word passion.
What?
Yeah.
Oh,
Now imagine what our society has done to invert the human nature, to really understand the human nature. If they recognize that passion takes you to the wrong place 100 times out of 100, you just aren't good enough to allow your passion to carry you to the right place.
What?
All the ancient philosophers said that. It's stunning how inverted American culture is to ancient understandings of who
but
a
when you
human
say
being
you're
was.
passionate about
That-
teaching a religion,
You would never say that from a philosophical point of view, because your passion always carries you to the wrong place. Always. 100% of the time. Okay? Because you can't figure out what you really need. That's the dilemma. You as a human being, you can't get there by yourself. So your passion always carries you to the wrong spot. And so karma and passion are they're both interlinked. Karma, desire, passion. It's the most challenging conversation with an American audience, because they've spent their whole life building their passion, building their desire, and maximizing what they think they get out of it. And I tell you, it's always the wrong thing. Always.
yeah,
Isn't that crazy?
That's super challenging. That's really challenging.
I feel like
So
It's like against like, yeah.
I know you're gonna. We've now discovered our wonderful conversation throughout the entire course, and that's the key to education: is find those inversions that really torque you, and that's the most fun to discover. Always the most fun. So you're on a great pathway, Ian.
I was just gonna say in this conversation, I feel like lust and passion kind of are interchangeable almost.
Sure. So we understand how lust gets us to the wrong place. Okay? They're very close. I think that you have to understand your desire for your passion for a new car, your desire is so
Instant
integral
gratification.
into that. So I think lust is a nice illustration that sort of gets you, oh, okay, yeah, that can get me to the wrong spot, wrong place in life. If I let my lusts take me to where they might take me. So we're on a great pathway. We will have some great conversations. I just tweaked you a little bit, but that's my job.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm always my favorite compliment from students is you make my brain hurt. So I do that purposely.
It's good.
You know you're growing when you hurt. You always know that.
Yeah.
When your brain is hurting, your brain is growing.
Yeah.
I need to let you guys go. So thank you, as long as you understand what's happening,
Yeah.
and don't get too far behind. Find some time to finish up, okay?
Yeah, I will.
Thanks, everybody. Ian, any final comments to everybody?
Take care. Be well. And I'll see you
Okay,
guys next
thanks.
week.
Have a good week.
See you guys.
Yeah, we'll be talking about